Former president and the 2024 Republican frontrunner Donald Trump pleaded not guilty today to more than 36 federal charges in a Miami courthouse. This unprecedented case is related to, of course, his alleged mishandling of government documents.
Joining us now to talk about these charges and how they could impact the 2024 presidential race, political analyst Jack O'Donnell and Carl Calabrese. Jack,
Good to
Carl,
be here.
thank you for
you.
joining us. So, yes, we're talking about how this could impact the race. My first question to both of you is, if you were Trump and his legal team, what would you want out of this? Would you want something quick? Would you want the ability to, prove your innocence quickly before, we get even deeper into this presidential election? Or do you want this to kind of move along, elongate it, maybe get into office and then have, this end?
Yeah, I think if I'm Donald Trump's lawyers, I would want to stretch this out, right? I would want to have the election. I'd want to be able to say he's won or X millions people are supporting him. How can you do this? I'd want to have that evidence.
I would too. I think Donald Trump would love this trial to be a jury of his 140 million peers and make this essentially a referendum on, do you want Donald Trump to be president regardless of all of this or not, and let the people decide. And if he wins, then you're likely to see him appoint an attorney general who drops the case, or they say if he was convicted, he could pardon himself. That's new ground, but you can't rule it out right now.
Now, he has been doing exactly what you've been saying for the better part of the past several days, and he certainly did that tonight in his first public comments at Bedminster in front of a crowd, again, lambasting Jack Smith, of course, the charges, the Biden administration, so on and so forth. But despite that fact, the court of public opinion is doing him tremendous favors in the polls, especially within the Republican Party. You shared some numbers earlier today because this is working. His strategy right now is working.
It is, and I follow this closely. Every time, he was indicted by Alvin Bragg in New York City, his numbers within the Republican Party went up. His lead over his opponents went up. Now this comes down, and guess what? His lead over Ron DeSantis is now increased based on two polls that came out over the weekend, a Gallup poll and a CBS poll. It's now a 38-point lead over DeSantis and a 67% lead over everybody else. So, by the way, I assume he's going to get another indictment out of Fulton County, Georgia.
Which is supposed to be stronger. Supposed to be. But whatever it is, the base of the party believes that this is just the latest get Trump effort. They started with the Russia hoax and then 2 impeachments, and now this is a continuation of that effort. And they see selective justice, and they're upset about it, and they rally to him. Now, the problem is, it helps him in the primaries and with the base of the Republican Party, but I don't think it helps him in a general election.
And let's talk about that.
I was going to say,
Jack, talk about that.
Absolutely. It appears to be helping him in the Republican primaries, as we said, but to win a general election, to win the Electoral College, you need to win independents, you need to win blanks, you need to win undecided voters, and this is not helping him with those folks. And people who are actually reading this indictment, right? This is not, the Alvin Bragg thing turned out to be a lot around confusing, legalese. This is Espionage Act. This is pictures of the bathroom, right? This is hitting folks harder. And we're seeing, we saw this in the midterm elections where Trump-endorsed candidates did very well in Republican primaries and fizzled when it came to Election Day.
It seems to me that, there's a theory out there that the Democrats want to destroy Trump because they fear him. I don't buy that at all. I think they want Trump. They want a rematch because they think they can beat him. They beat him once. And they, as Jack said, he lost the 2020 election because of 3 groups that abandoned him from 2016. Independents, suburbanites, women in general, suburban women in particular. If he's the candidate again, you're going to see the Democrats reach back into history to reframe a question. Here's the question. I go back to the 1980 debate between Ronald Reagan and Jimmy Carter. At the end of that debate, Ronald Reagan looked into the camera and he said, this election is about one question. Are you better off today than you were 4 years ago? Wrapped up the election right there. If Donald Trump is the candidate, the Democrats will go back to those 3 groups and rephrase it and say, do you feel any differently about him today than you did 4 years ago? That's what they're banking on.
And I'm curious, too, what you think about Republicans and conservatives, especially those who are going to be right now firmly in his camp and do believe, like you said, Carl, this is sort of that witch hunt, or this is selective justice, or the selective application of justice. That has worked, as we've demonstrated in the court of public opinion. His poll numbers are soaring. But I'm curious because that does not hold the same weight within the federal court system, or any court system for that matter, in the event that this moves forward and we start hearing and seeing more evidence come out. Do you think that there is a point at which that tide could turn, not for the independents and others who are valuable, but for his supporters who have been entrenched with him along the way?
I don't see it during the primaries. I really don't. I mean, his people just believe that the system, the deep state, whatever you want to call it, have been out to get him, and they will not give up until they do. And that's been the experience so far that I've seen in the polls, and I see it continuing.
Well, and I guess I would just say to that, polling is a snapshot in time, right? And I do think this is a lot of Republicans expressing their doubts about the legal system, about Democrats in general, the partisanship of this country. But when it gets closer, people are going to say, some of them are going to say, can we win, right? And we've also seen some of the polling being a lot closer in Iowa and New Hampshire than nationally. And I think, my final point there is, right now, this is Donald Trump against a gang, right? If this comes down to one against one, whether that's DeSantis or someone else comes out of this, what we've seen in other presidential elections, it becomes a choice, and we'll see what choice people make.
I agree with that, because right now we're talking about this in a vacuum. But we're going to start primaries and caucuses early in 2024. Now you've got a contest. Now you've got people competing against Donald Trump. I saw on the screen Chris Christie. I mean, there's a guy who is a brawler. It'll be very interesting to see him on a debate stage with Donald Trump. But no one has been able to take Donald Trump down yet in any way, shape, or form. And it'll be interesting to see if DeSantis and/or Christie or maybe a dark horse can do it. But, we've got to let the campaign play out, because all kinds of curveballs can get thrown during the campaign.
It's early.
Yeah, I mean, what DeSantis has done differently is not just said, hey, he's awful, right? Like a Chris Christie or everybody tried to do 6 years ago. He said, hey, Trump started this movement. He's right, but he's not the one to get it done. When I was governor, I got it done. That's maybe a more compelling argument for some of those folks. Yeah,
okay, our producers are in our ear telling us to wrap a couple of times here. I'm sure we'll have you guys on, in the future, and we'll see if what we're talking about now kind of comes to fruition. So thank you both.
Thank you.
Jack, Carl, thanks.